welcome to the Intuitive Insights podcast series. I'm Nina Lockwood, founder and director of Intuitive Interim and Executive Search. Throughout this series, I will be sharing engaging conversations with talented leaders from across the UK transport sector. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Dyan Crowther to the Intuitive Insights podcast, who really doesn't need any introduction, to be fair. Dyan has been Chief Exec of High Speed 1 for the past 4 years, is a non-exec director for the East West Railway Company, an active board trustee for the Railway Children charity, and as if that wasn't enough, last July was named as chair for the National Skills Academy for Rail, replacing Mike Brown. Dyan is also well known for her significant efforts to improve diversity and inclusion in the UK transport industry, and in this feature-length episode shares her career story, her views on leadership and her ambitions for the rail industry as we move into a period of significant change and transformation. I hope you enjoy. Dyan, hello and welcome to the Intuitive Insights podcast. I'm absolutely delighted that you've taken the time to join me. Thank you so much. And on the basis it's your fault that we're doing it in the first place, then it seems only right that you should be a guest. Because going back to one of our conversations over the summer, when you suggested to me that this might be something that I could do, and I immediately had a comfort zone moment where I go, oh no, I don't want to do that. And then your confidence in me to do it was what actually enabled me to let go of the ledge. So thank you for that, and thank you for being here. I'm going to hand over to you in terms of this the first part of the podcast. I'd love to know more about your career in rail. How did you get into the industry in the first place? Talk me through the headlines of what you've done so far, and I'd love to know more about your current role as Chief Exec at High Speed 1.
Brilliant. I'm just going to have to sort the dog out. Oh no, he's all right. He can hear me speaking to someone, so he's growling. All right, okay. So how did I get into the industry? And Nina, it's brilliant to sort of be kind of talking with you today. I didn't quite envisage being part of your experiment, so to speak, but it's great to be here. And I've watched them, and I think they're brilliant. You're doing a great job. So how did I get into the industry? I wanted a graduate job that was a little bit different to the norm, and certainly when I was applying, 35 years ago, the railway stood out because they were different. You got an awful lot of accountability very early on in your career. You got to work outside, you got to get your hands dirty, and that was one of the key things that really, really attracted to me. I couldn't really see myself, working in a bank, sat behind a desk, working in retail. I've worked in retail and it didn't really float my boat. So the railways were a great kind of transition. Can you hear him?
It's Snoop in the background. I think oh, bless him. Good grief, he's huge. My word.
I'm going to let him out. Hang on. I'll be back. Come on, you. Right. Okay, so I was talking about a lot of responsibility early on in your career. And variety as well. And I think that's one of the reasons I've stayed in the rail sector. It's one of the few sectors where you can get to do everything. And I think that's one of the things that we undersell. Part of my kind of role at the moment, or not necessarily at High Speed 1, is I chair NSAR, National Skills Academy for Rail. And last month we launched Routes into Rail, which is basically, getting railways out to people thinking about, what should I be choosing as a career? And it doesn't matter if you're young, middle-aged, old, the railway has got something for you, and we need to get that message out there. And that's something I'm passionate about. I've moved around the sector. I've run train operating companies. I've worked in infrastructure. I've been the person at headquarters, and it's fabulous, but it also puts me in a really strong place to understand the system, and the railway is a complicated system. So it's fundamentally important that the people who work in it understand the system, respect the system, and learn how to kind of work within that system as well. So yeah. In terms of, where did I start? So I came off the graduate training scheme, very wet behind the ears, a young kind of 21-year-old many years ago. And I was thrown in as a station manager at Peckham Rye. So I had 10 stations under my accountability, about 60 or 70 odd staff. And I've never been to South London in my life, let alone run stations. And being called out at 2 or 3 in the morning for yet another ticket office break-in, a train derailment somewhere. It was kind of character building, shall we say. You learned very quickly about what to do. I was used to pop off at the local police station, and if I was being called out to Herne Hill or Brixton or Streatham Hill, I've told stories in the past where I've been called out to sort of Streatham and I've forgotten my kind of station keys. So I've had to go in through the back car park and navigate my way through the ladies of the night who used to take their clients there. But that's how it was all those years ago. Character building. You learnt how the railway ran, kind of 24/7. And it was good, and it gave me a fantastic grounding to kind of help me on my career really. I was fortunate that when I joined the railway, we were just moving towards privatisation. The industry had just experienced sectorisation, which was Intercity, Network South East, Red Star parcels. You forget about all of those, and of course not forgetting regional railways. And that was British Rail's first attempt to try and respond to the passenger and differentiate the product that was on offer. So post sectorisation, it was privatisation, as I've said. Now, what a great opportunity for people like myself and my peer group at the time, because the industry saw many people leave, which meant that people like myself had the opportunity to step up, and people took a risk on us, to do the type of jobs that there was nobody left in the industry to do anymore. And that was great, and I was really lucky that people were prepared to take a risk on me. Philip Benham gave me my first big kind of promotion when I went to run the south end of the East Coast Main Line. Brian Birdsall then became the regional director, and these are sort of people who I think about now. I give chances to young people. Come and cut your teeth on HS1. Come and cut your teeth in another part of the organisation, because I know full well that there are an awful lot of people that put their reputation at stake for me in my career, and I didn't want to let them down. And in the same way, I don't want to let my the youngsters coming through down by sort of saying, well, you don't have enough experience to do that, because you've got to give people experience and you've got to give them the opportunity. So yeah, very fortunate. Privatisation. I went to work in Railtrack, and I worked on the station side. Love stations. That's my heart. That's that's where I was brought up. And stayed with Railtrack and ended up heading up all of the managed stations for Railtrack, and at quite a young age being a direct report into a board member, and decided that, so whilst I knew an awful lot about stations, I didn't know much about anything else in Railtrack, and clearly it was all about track, track infrastructure. So I persuaded the then commercial director, Richard Middleton, that to sponsor me and persuade a route to take on Dyan as a customer relationship executive. So off I went to look after Chiltern Railways. And that was quite a challenging role. Adrian Shooter, who's very well known and very challenging, very successful in terms of his management buyout, very passionate about Chiltern, and expected 150% from the supply chain. And that was great, because you really had to be on your toes. You really needed to be thinking customer all the time, and that was a good grounding for me. So it was a great way of me finding out an awful lot about kind of how the routes operated, what happened in the track access world, and gave me a really good kind of breadth across the rest of Railtrack. And gave me access to lots of different people and a better understanding in terms of how the whole system operated. I stayed as a CRE, and between all of that there was like maternity leave and things like that, and I was always very kind of pragmatic. I led for the West Coast the project Evergreen, initiative, which was the Chiltern Get a Longer. They were the only franchise that got a franchise extension when John Morton sort of said, come on down, make me an offer. Everyone's sort of saying, we want longer franchises. Well, come and make me an offer. Well, we did. The Chiltern and Railtrack did. We did make an offer, and it got taken up. And it was really exciting to be involved in that and actually kind of have that long-term vision, for a piece of the railway that had been kind of underutilised. And now when you look at Chilterns today and what people like Rob Brighouse have done with it, and more recently Mary Hewitt, you kind of I take a step back and I feel quite proud that I had something to do with that. I helped create that vision. And now when you see East West Railway coming through, and I sit on the board of East West Railway, that's really, really close to my heart. And you kind of think, well, East West probably wouldn't have happened, without, the vision that some people many, many years ago had for Chiltern, doubling a single track railway, new stations, Warwick Parkway, all of those. Chilterns were incredibly innovative and very, very strategic in their approach. And it was a great experience for me to be not only the CRE there, but also to then be given the sort of the programme management responsibility to actually kind of lead that piece of work. Railtrack then went into administration. That was a bit, wasn't quite on the kind of the agenda, so to speak, for many of us. And it went into administration when I was on maternity leave, funnily enough. And I came back into the organisation, and it was visibly different, palpably different. It was almost like the life had been sucked out of people. And I just looked around and just thought, I'm not too sure I want to stay here, because this is quite soul destroying. And I think because I'd been out of the business and then come back into it after maternity leave, I probably felt it more than other people. Other members of Railtrack had not necessarily got used to it, but had accepted it because they'd been there when it had happened, and I just came back in afterwards. And I was given the opportunity to go and be the commercial director for Arriva Trains Northern. And I did hesitate about that because I live in Hertfordshire, and York's quite a long way from Hertfordshire, and I had a young family at the time. So I was either going to move my family or have a really long commute. So I ended up having a long commute. But it was a right decision for me. And I went to work for an old colleague of mine called Ray Price. And we'd worked together under Intercity down at King's Cross. And he was the ops manager and I was the retail manager. And the two of us got on quite well, and he was the MD, and he said he needed someone to come and kiss babies, as he put it, because he wasn't very good at it, or look after stakeholders. So I arrived, and the headline in the I can't remember now, I think it was the York Telegraph or something, was Dyan takes on the job that few would want. So I'm just like, great. What does that mean? And the reasons for that was Arriva Trains Northern at the time were in dispute with the RMT, TSSA, and indeed ASLEF. So they had strikes forming with every single kind of staff group, and they were in quite a lot of bother. They were running a kind of an amended timetable. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. My view was, well, anything I do isn't going to make it worse. So, and I thought, okay, well, let's go up there and see what's needed. And it was really a back to basics campaign. So tell people what we can do, tell them when we're going to do it, and then do it. You build up trust and you build up confidence. And that wasn't just our stakeholders, that was our internal employees as well, who had gone through an absolutely torrid time with the previous franchise holder. And the story is that Arriva got into Arriva Trains Northern, and indeed Mersey Travel, because they wanted to buy a bus company, and they ended up buying 2 rail franchises. And they bought kind of two rail franchises that had been sort of subject to quite a lot of kind of cost management control, a lot of things stripped out of the organisation. So the added value stuff just wasn't there anymore. And even during the strikes, when the management team were deployed to the likes of Leeds ticket office, and and I remember counting cash, in the ticket office, in the cash room at Leeds, because the cash counter didn't work, and used to get in 30 grand, per shift, and it's just like, well, I'm not surprised the staff are on strike. They don't have the basics, to do their job properly. So it was really simple things. So there were some benefits, of doing that, because when we came out of that dispute situation, we were able to move kind of quite quickly to put a lot of things right. And and a lot of the things were just like basics, absolute basics. So it's back to basics from from an employee perspective, but also back to basics in terms of how we communicate with our stakeholders and indeed passengers. And indeed, after 2 or 3 years, we completely changed the tide. And rather than a post bag full of people wanting our heads on the stick outside main headquarters York, our post bag was full of people sort of saying, we really hope you keep the franchise, we like Arriva now. So we achieved that turnaround really just by doing the basic stuff, doing what it says on the tin. If you're going to run a train, run it. If you're going to give people compensation, give it to them. No bells and whistles, just do what it says on the tin. And we achieved that turnaround and took the franchise back to profit, and we were in a profit share arrangement with the DfT at the time, so everybody was happy. The franchise was then awarded to Serco, and the lovely Heidi Mottram came in to be the MD, and I'd recruited her into Arriva to be the commercial director, because partway through my story with Arriva, I became the MD as well. So, right. And probably one of the biggest challenges I had being the MD was, having to communicate with the whole team that we weren't going to be put forward to the next round of the franchise. And that was quite tough, because that meant we still had another 14 months running this franchise, and we knew as a management team, we probably weren't still going to be here, because as we all know, there's an inverse relationship between your seniority in an organisation and your ability to keep your job once the hands change. So one of the things we did is we said, right, as a senior management team, we're going to make a commitment. All of us, we're going to stay here until the last day, and we did, and we communicated that to the wider team, and that was probably one of the best things that we did, because that was one of the best things we did, because that gave people stability and certainty. So everybody knew, okay, so this team are going to stay in place. The second thing we did was we rewrote the business plan, and we sort of said, no, okay, we're here for 14 months. We've still got to deliver stuff, and this is what our new business plan is. So we did that. We set objectives on that. We then looked at key people who were flight risks, and sort of said, okay, who do we need to keep in the organisation so that we maintain this going concern? So we made sure that the key people were kept in the organisation, and could stay and wanted to stay, and therefore didn't pose a flight risk. And then I spoke to my chief exec at the time, Bob Davis in Arriva, and he was a great guy. I really enjoyed working for him. And I remember him giving me a lift home once from, I think it was Huntingdon, when all the wires were down in his chauffeur-driven car, because he was stuck as well. So I'll give you a lift home, Dyan. But really nice guy. And I sort of said to him, look, Bob, I said, quick, straight question. I want to know what your approach is going to be now that that we're not being put forward to the next franchise. Because if you're going to asset strip, or you're going to keep this as a going concern, I said, because if you're going to asset strip, I'm not interested. I sort of said, and neither will be the rest of the management team. He goes, no, Dyan, it's a going concern. We will continue to invest in Arriva Trains Northern. We see, the reputation on Arriva Trains Northern as being fundamental to us bidding for other franchises. So that was a really important conversation for us, because it kind of set the stall out for how we could approach our last 14 months. And we did approach it as a going concern. We continued to invest. We continued, to run schemes for sort of staff development. And then I think we all felt quite proud when we handed the keys over to Serco that it was a going concern. Yeah, most definitely a going concern. From there, from Arriva, I went to Network Rail. That was interesting. So and I went as the route director, so in York, so looking after the East Coast Main Line, working for the fantastic Mr. Gisby, who's a fantastic friend of mine, someone who I hugely respect and admire, and he's done so many things for the rail sector, with his vision, his innovation, and also his passion to continuously improve. So went to work for Robin. Spent 4 years as the route director for the East Coast Main Line, very much in the early days of Network Rail, people starting to find their feet. Network Rail, when they'd come in, it was very much stop the rot, raise the bar, and then world-class delivery. So I joined just at the end to stop the rot. And yeah, and that was interesting from a cultural perspective, because control had been taken away from people and accountability. And I often describe my first couple of weeks at my desk in York as being this steady stream of people coming up to my desk going, "Can we do this, Dyan? Can I have your permission to do this?" And I'm sat there going, "Well, I don't know what you do. Why do you need my permission to do that? I know bugger all about what you're talking to me about. Why aren't you making that decision?" And it's because the decision making had been taken away, and I understand absolutely why that was the case. But once you take something away, it's really difficult to turn it back on again. And if you take away if you take away kind of empowerment, and if you take away accountability, then people lose confidence and they don't want to start making decisions again. So from a cultural perspective, it was really about kind of addressing sort of some of those areas, giving people permission again to have the bright ideas and want to go and have a go again, and just reminding people that York was a long way from London, so who's going to know anyway? But, yeah, that's where my maverick side of me comes in. I like that. But sometimes you do that. I think the route had also was under quite a lot of scrutiny because of Hatfield, and when I joined the route, there was a danger that some of the previous team were facing prosecution, and that in itself also affected people's decision making. And Andrew Hinton was the territory maintenance director, good buddy of mine, and we were like this in terms of how we worked together. And Andrew would go out on site quite regularly, because sometimes you'd be doing the testing of the track, checking the gauge, checking, and you would get some sort of some anomalies and results, and what was happening was the guys on the ground, because they were nervous, were just defaulting to worst case scenarios, so they weren't doing the analytical side, and I can completely understand that. So Andrew used to go out, and not holding hands, but just sort of saying, right, okay, talk me through what you see, right, on the basis of that, this is what I think you need to do. And I think we've lost a lot of that in the rail industry now. We've lost people like Andrew, who are prepared to kind of go out there and go, right, okay, so what can you see? I'll use my experience to tell you what I can see, and you make the decision. But I've often, hugely kind of respected Andrew for that approach, because a lot of people have just sort of said, oh, we'll just put the speed restriction on, we don't want to take the risk. But it's about using that judgment sometimes, and kind of common sense. I'm not sort of saying that Andrew was out there taking risks. No, he wasn't. He was using his experience, he was using his knowledge and the data available to make that decision. A lot of that has now kind of come through in sort of some of the technology innovation that Network Rail has made. So it takes the pressure off of the individual, but it still requires the individual to make that judgment. So working on the East Coast Main Line was great, because obviously I knew a lot of the train operator kind of MDs, and trying to address sort of some of the performance challenges. We had 3 or 4 new franchises, so I had accountability for East Midlands trains when fantastic Tim Shoveler kind of took over there. So it was an exciting time. Corby, new station at Corby, East Midlands Parkway, a new timetable. It was great. We also had Thameslink kicking off on the south end of the route as well. We had First Capital Connect as a new franchise, the hugely challenging Elaine Holt, who's a great friend of mine. But goodness me, did we used to fight like cat and dog sometimes. But that's what you need. So sometimes you need to have that disruptive governance. Because it's only when you have disruptive governance do you actually kind of make change. And I think sometimes we're too afraid to have that kind of behind the bike shed chat, so that you can actually move things forward. So rather than dancing around the bloody handbags, let's just have a straightforward discussion. What is it that you want? What is it that I want? And where can we meet in the middle? And you need to have that type of working relationship, because if leaders don't get on, neither do the teams. So you need to be able, to be doing that kind of cabinet responsibility moving forward. But it was a great time on the East Coast Main Line. So much change, so much going on. They're great to be at. We quite often kind of forget about key output zero on Thameslink, which was platform extensions. Getting all ready. So we could start running the longer trains. Never mind the core section. Everyone remembers Thameslink as London Bridge. No. It started a lot earlier. Up on the East Midlands. And that was the fundamental start. Of the actual kind of Thameslink programme. And it was, it's fantastic to be involved with all of that, and then look back. And I travel on Thameslink now because I live on the GM. So actually, again, seeing, oh yeah, I had something to do with, getting the 700s in, and and I remember why that decision was made on that part of the network. And it's great to sort of see that, from a system perspective. I then went on to what became obvious was East Coast Main Line was too big. It was quite a big route. And with everything that was going on with Thameslink, it was going to be too big for sort of one route director to manage. So we came up with a plan to split off the East Midlands and join it with HS1. So and it was called Midland and Continental, and still to this day I do not know how I managed to get that name through the sort of the Network Rail hierarchy, because we just put it forward as a bit tongue in cheek, and they went, oh yeah, that's okay, and like me and my team were going, we've got to with that one. So it became Midland and Continental, and the link between the two was the wonderful St Pancras. So you came in on the East Midlands into St Pancras, and then you could do your high-speed journey out from St Pancras as well. And the reason why I went to do that role was A, because of Thameslink, but also B, because of High Speed 1, and we were entering a phase then of sort of some quite tricky commercial negotiations with the DfT, the shadow organisation HS1, and indeed Network Rail, because there was an old agreement that needed to be modernised. It was a legacy agreement. Network Rail kind of held all the cards, all the levers, so that it was fairly clear that from a regulatory perspective that wouldn't be allowed to continue. so we needed to move into a better place, a better commercial space all round. So I had a lot of fun leading the negotiations on that one, whilst at the same time dabbling with Thameslink. Well, not dabbling, but being this sort of the operational lead for Thameslink as well. Yeah. And then the lovely Derek Holmes passed away, and that affected everybody in Network Rail, because Derek was like the granddaddy of Robin's team. It was Derek you went to if you wanted advice. It was Derek that was always there, picked up the phone going, noticed you were a bit off today, Dyan. So everybody in that team at the time felt Derek's death, and it was difficult. And Derek was, a big pair of shoes to fill, really, in terms of his knowledge and his enthusiasm and his drive. And his role was left unfilled for a good many months, and it was just kind of covered on an interim. And things started to creak a little bit from a national perspective. So Robin asked me if I would go and do the kind of director of operations role for him. So I did, and that was kind of quite very different, because I went from having a team of 3,000 or 4,000 down to a team at Milton Keynes, and I went from being almost like a command and control to influence, and how can I add value to the routes. So So the key role of the central team was to sort of, you know, spot the national trends and then come up with a solution to sort of say, right, this is you know, this is what needs to be done. So some of the areas that we looked at nationally, you know, at the time was the National Level Crossing Risk Reduction Programme, the cable theft programme, where we managed to achieve a change in law, you know, working collaboratively with the BTP. And, you know, all of those are things that I look back on quite proudly, thinking, yeah, you know, we did all right on that. You know, that was the right thing to do, where we could kind of take the collective narrative and from a central perspective push a change so that we could add value down to the guys on the routes. So rather than doing stuff 6 or 7 times, it just needed to be done once. And that's really what my philosophy of what a HQ role should be. You're there to serve the routes, so therefore, how can you make you know, the routes' lives easier, which means they can focus on operations, they can focus on the passenger and the customer. So it's a good experience there. And the other thing that, you know, certainly I took on as director of operations was the national media lead for some reason. So yeah, so my, you know, my lovely mug was on TV quite often. And on TV quite often, because obviously we had some disputes going on with signallers at the time over pay, ECROs as well. But again, it was good experience, and, you know, and good exposure, and also being the sort of yeah, just being the national lead on those type of things. It was, yeah, challenging, but
Yeah.
but also, you know, quite exciting as well on occasion. So being pulled out of the front of I guess the quadrant at Milton Keynes, when I think we had a really bad run of dewirements on the west coast and the east coast, one after the other, and some correspondents had joined the dots, and, you know, and his opening salvo to me was, so, you know, are you running a third world railway, Dyan? So you immediately go, so I can understand why you think that, but the facts of the matter are bang, bang, bang. You know, and we're really, really sorry we've caused disruption, and we're working hard on it, you know, etc. But I mean, they were good. It was good. It's about thinking on your feet, and certainly gave you lots and lots of experience in that regard, and pulling deeply on, you know, very angry customers on barrier lines at King's Cross and, you know, Peckham Rye, all those years of experience where you did have to think on your feet. You didn't have a manual that you could consult because you're in real time. All kind of helps in terms of being able to sort of take on those additional roles and kind of accountabilities. So after my kind of role at the centre, I then went on to the West Coast Main Line. So that was my last job in Network Rail, actually. So I spent 10 years, and I left Network Rail being the sort of the route managing director for the West Coast Main Line, which I absolutely loved. Loved working with Mr. Bear Park at Virgin, and, you know, and my fond memories of there is how do we motivate the teams? You know, how do we motivate the teams to kind of work together? So we came up with this idea of a golden pendolino, because you probably remember Network Rail used to have a golden rabbit that used to kind of go around the depots for, you know, good performance. And Ian Coucher had kind of dreamed up this idea, and it did incentivise teams to do it. And this rabbit used to travel up and down the network depending on who had won it. And I remember it arriving down, I think, in the East Midlands once with a blooming tartan kilt on it, because it had been in Scotland, and I think that was Mr. Simpson's idea of a joke. So, yeah. So Phil Bear Park and I sort of said, right, we'll have a golden pendolino. So I'm thinking like this nice pendolino, like about this big. So Phil turned up in my office with this thing that was about 3 foot long, you know, and this tall. I said, oh my God, I said, it's not gold. He goes, no, but I've called it the golden pendolino. So, but it was great because it incentivized the teams. And I think one of our proudest moments was when Richard Branson actually agreed to come and award the golden pendolino to the Euston team and the track team for the great performance. Now Branson doesn't do that lightly. So the fact that, you know, he came down, we were just like, wow, that's really impressive. And it was great that the team meted and greeted him. Phil and I were nowhere to be seen. You know, this was their moment, you know, and that was fabulous. And that's very much what I like to think about my time on the West Coast was. It's very much, you know, how do you empower the teams, and how do you empower them to take leadership, you know, to actually, you know, put things right. So we can put the frameworks in place, the funding, the equipment, etc. But how do you bring all of that together so the system pulls in the right direction? And then I ended up at GTR so, as the chief operating officer, and I was there for 2.5, 3 years. A fantastic role, really exciting. The first franchise to be let after the West Coast debacle. So everybody was really, on tenterhooks about if it was going to work or not, and sort of so on and so forth. And really, really transformational stuff included in the franchise agreement. 5 new fleets to be introduced, a new station operating model, lots more drivers to be recruited. And all of that is now being happened today and has happened. And clearly there was obviously the introduction of, the Class 700s on Thameslink and a complete recast of the timetable and transformation. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And then we got into dispute with, first of all, with the drivers and then with the RMT. And then what followed really was, kind of 18 months of hell for our passengers and also for the team itself at GTR. And yeah, they were difficult times. They were really difficult times. And it was, I think it's only when you come out of it and you look back on it, you realise how much it did take out of your home life, really. I didn't do anything for 2 years, from a social perspective. And I know a lot of the guys down on GTR didn't. Some of the team couldn't even play cricket on a Sunday because they got so much abuse from spectators. My boss at the time, Charles Horton, his children used to get picked on at school. And I think that just goes to show kind of how important the railway is to people's lives. And I used to spend a couple of evenings a week on the Barrow line at Victoria or London Bridge, just listening to people's stories. And they hadn't been getting home to put their children to bed. They'd missed reading the book, to their 2-year-old for 5 nights in a row. When you start to affect people's lives like that, it's you kind of have to do something. And one of the things that we did was we put in an amended timetable. So we basically sort of said, look, we can't deliver this. We need to put in a resource-led timetable. We need to give passengers back certainty. And we did that. And that's what passengers were telling us. We want certainty. If you're going to say you're going to run a train, we want to know it's going to run. Even if we've got to stand all the way to Littlehampton, that's fine. At least we know we're going to get there. And that's by and large what we did. And and the train planning team and the resources team at GTR did a fantastic job to actually kind of get that through. And that gave us a little bit of breathing space while we could. Then it's a bit like kind of going back to basics. You then start to look at, okay, so what are the other levers that we've got in place to enable us to keep running more trains, even if that means buses and you're joining whilst in the background you're still trying to resolve the dispute with ASLEF and indeed the RMT. Did difficult times and it's great now to sort of see GTR doing so well. So you can sort of see where the new rolling stock has been fantastic. The new timetable is fantastic. Southern performs out of its skin most days now. It was down at about high 70s. The recast of the timetable, the new rolling stock on Gatwick Express, and sort of so on and so forth. Massive difference. So it's really good to sort of see that coming through. And it's really good to see, the smiles on the faces now of, the guys on the ground. And I know when the Thameslink timetable was introduced a couple of years ago, there was a bit of a blip, and certainly on the GN, where I commute from, I used to turn up on the station and go, wonder if anything's going to turn up this morning. But they got over it. 3 or 4 weeks, they sorted themselves out and they got over it. Was it? Could it have been avoided? Probably, but this was a massive transformative change that the industry was bringing, and I don't hear anybody talking about complaining about the timetable now. The capacity allocation is fantastic. The reliability is really good, and performance is good as well. Really good, great vision being implemented, and is now delivering the benefits that it originally intended to bring. Which then brings me on to HS1 really. So yeah, so joined HS1. I was a bit, I was a little bit like, okay, that's interesting. And it's kind of one of those jobs when I was going through the recruitment process, I was kind of thinking, oh, I really want that job. I really, really want that job. Kind of thing. Yeah, I really want that job. And I'd spoken with Nicola Shaw, who was the previous CEO, wonderful lady, fantastic individual, and 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 the way she spoke to me about HS1, I was like thinking, gosh, this sounds really special and really different. And I obviously kind of interviewed with the shareholders, and very fortunate to get the job. Now, just before I started, I got a call sort of saying, "I would like to see you." So I was like thinking, why is that, Ben? Something happened. And basically, we were owned by pension funds. They've done a strategic review of their portfolio, and we're going to do a market review of HS1, which was kind of speak for we might sell it. So I was just like, okay, so I've just signed up to work for you guys for the next kind of X number of years, and now you're selling us. And Rob Holden, who was my chairman at the time, he sort of said to me, before you go in there, Dyan, he goes, whatever they say to you, just smile and sort of say that's fine, because he obviously knew. And I was like, okay, Rob, I'll do that. So I did that. But what a brilliant experience, honestly. So we were put in charge of selling the business. Okay, so we worked with advisors. Myself and the CFO at the time then went off on a marketing trip around Asia. So I was like, Japan, Korea, Hong Kong, China, and you're just like, where are we today? But so that was my job in the first quarter that I arrived at HS1 was to put to work with advisors and put that sales case together. Where else would I have that opportunity? Brilliant. So we went through that, and clearly, HS1 is quite unique. It's a very different type of kind of structure, to what you see elsewhere in the country. We only have 55 people, 56. We outsource everything, and we have a big kind of shareholder oversight, because obviously shareholders, you're there to deliver for your shareholders. So, shareholders want you to be profitable. So therefore that's, what we do spend quite a lot of time doing. And then also, demonstrating the benefits of, the sort of shareholder ownership. So sold the business, got through that, did a few management presentations in front of a lot of investment funds and things at the lovely Renaissance Hotel, and we're now owned by a UK-based consortia of Equitix and Infrared. And that in itself brought different challenges because 30% of the investment is listed. So from a stock exchange perspective, that meant different reporting and different ways of, how we had to kind of equip ourselves. So I just feel as though my brain has just kind of got bigger and bigger over the years, where you have to kind of make space. Oh, okay, I need to learn this bit now. You need to wedge that in. And that's when I talk about leadership. That's kind of one of my leadership principles: is you never ever stop learning. And I was on a podcast this morning with two young apprentices from high speed from the High Speed Rail Group, in the apprentices crew. Amelia from Alstom and Hannah from can't remember where she's from now, but she's an assistant quantity surveyor. Well, I felt about 80, like talking to these kind of young girls.
Yeah.
But again, it's kind of having that kind of passion and kind of focus on kind of what the future is. What are the benefits, of high speed rail, and talking to these people, and I feel enormously privileged that I'm the CEO of the UK's only high speed railway, and enormously privileged that I've got the opportunity to keep on learning. And it's like I said to the two girls this morning, you never ever stop learning, because one of the things they asked me was, what advice would you give to us? And I sort of said, be yourself and ask lots of questions. So, and that's absolutely fundamental, because if you're not asking questions, you're not learning. And if you're not asking questions, people think you're not interested. So also always ask a question. Make sure it's a good question, not a stupid question, but we'll always be there, having that kind of curiosity, and that's one of the great things about Robin Gisby. He was always curious. It's just like, why are you asking me that? So why have you done that then? I have. No, but why, guys? So that's absolutely sort of fundamental.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so HS1, what a terrific role. I often sort of say it's the best job in UK rail. I get to dabble in Europe. I get to, oversee St Pancras. It's just fantastic. And our biggest challenge now is, how do we recover from the pandemic?
Absolutely. I think that's an area which I'm really keen to hear your views on, Dyan, because what you've just done for us, and it's been a massive privilege to listen to that career story, because I knew bits of it, but what you've just done is kind of weave so many bits of leadership gems into there, in terms of how you empower people, how you lead people, that kind of, the passion that you have for what you do is obvious to anybody who meets you, sees you, hears you. That the passion that you have for what you do is just incredible. And what's really kind of making me think here is that when people think about a career in rail, the vision that people have, it's like, well, are you going to drive a train, or will you be working on the platform, or will you be, on a member of train crew, all of which are absolutely critical, obviously, to running the railway. But I think that if people listen to your career story and to hear what you've done and where you've been and the different things that you've been involved in, the massive transformation that the industry's gone through since you joined, and now we're about to go through another massive transformation. And I'm really keen to hear, if I was to get my magic wand out, Dyan, and say to you, you can have 3 wishes for what for these opportunities for the industry as we move forward. What would be the 3 things that you would want the industry to really focus in on to make that transformation?
So I think the first thing is really just around, put yourselves in the shoes of our future customers. So what do they want? But do that as an industry together. And I think that there's lots of good stuff out there, but it's all piecemeal, and therefore it becomes wasted, and it doesn't become productive, and it doesn't become efficient. So be prepared, to do stuff because it's good. Don't just not do it because it's not your idea. And I think, the industry has lost a lot of that. It's something that British Rail was brilliant at. The old kind of the research divisions in Derby, the technical centre, they would do the research. It's a bit like I was sort of saying earlier on, the role that I had as director of operations. Look at the gap, develop something, roll it out. Okay, and I think we've lost that. We've lost that as an industry, we could be so much better if we worked together. So much more powerful, so much more productive if we actually did that. And again, that's what we've been trying to do at NSAR under Roots into Rail. So let's do something once. Let's all get behind it, and let's all make a difference by doing it. So I think that would be the first thing. The second thing is really on the kind of the skills agenda. To be frank, because when I look at the future, and I look at the skills gap that the industry is facing, it really does scare me. We've got an aging kind of profile. We've got increase in demand in work, in kind of renewals and enhancements, and a huge kind of digitisation agenda. And we need different skill sets. We either need to retrain, recruit, and at the moment, I don't think the industry has quite got it in terms of what's required. So that would be my kind of other magic wand, and it's sort of something that I push quite hard as part of the Williams review consultation. Is we need to kind of have that overall kind of academy approach. Again, something that BR was really good at doing, by sort of saying, right, these are resources we need. Right, let's go and get 26 of them, 10 of them, 10 of them. But again, we just do it in a piecemeal way, and nobody really knows where it's going. And if you do it from an academy perspective, an industry perspective, you could do what I did, back in 1986, where I spend time at a depot, I spend time with a train operator, I spend time, with a rolling stock operator, because everybody understands they're supporting, that overall kind of skills entry into the country, or into the sector, and that kind of skills entry will then understand the railway as a system, not just that bit of my system in a lot of detail. And I think that's that's the fundamental thing around the sort of the recruitment and the skills gap at the moment. And then the third thing, is really the magic wand is for passengers to want to come back. So whatever the marketing campaign is, it's going to have to be bloody good. And it's going to have to be a combination of things around price, reliability, seating, speed, all of those things, because passengers have forgotten about us. They remember the bad stuff. Of course they remember the bad stuff, but they haven't, they're not remembering the convenience. And actually it's quite nice to travel by rail. And again, the apprentice I was talking to this morning immediately says, I've got a car, she goes, but I much prefer to go by train. She goes, I can do my work, I can do this, I can do that, but she says it's really expensive. So again, listen to what people are saying, because if you want to get people back, you're going to have to listen. And stop counting the pennies.
Yeah. And it's challenging, isn't it? I was involved in a conversation this morning where we were talking about fares reform, and the fact that the people with much more of an inside knowledge than I have were saying that the department are all up for it. They understand the need for fares reform. We know season tickets are no longer valid. It's not a model that we can go back to. But I think the challenge we've got there is that the Treasury are not quite with the programme yet. And because obviously there's such a lot of money from Treasury, from the public purse being spent on rail at the moment, then there seems to be a little bit of a kind of battle going on in terms of what we can do. But I agree with you, it's too expensive, they're not going to come back.
No. And you've got to think about what rail does as an economic driver. And and it does. High-speed rail drives, economies. It creates economies, and we've seen that just on High-Speed 1. We did a socio-economic impact study just over 18 months ago, because people always just sort of say, "So what's high-speed rail ever done for us?" So I was like, "Well, I can tell you now because I've done a study." And so we can use statistics like, well, it brings 2 billion a year, into the UK economy through tourism. 2 billion, right? Because people travel to London, from North America, from China, and they want to do the short hop across to Paris. They do that. That's part of their itinerary. It's taken 66,000 flights a year, out of the air. 750,000 tons of carbon. Don't we have a big sustainability agenda going on at the moment? So when I'm having conversations with people about that, I often talk about, are you prepared to lose that opportunity, just because you're counting the pennies today? And that's the story that we should be telling as an industry. We shouldn't be shy, that we're costing a lot of money. We should be celebrating the fact that we're drivers of economies. We can support, the urgent sustainability agenda, and decarbonisation. And that's our role to play, and that's what we ought to be pushing, and we ought to be an awful lot more noisy about it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. You've given us loads, Dyan, in terms of leadership as we've gone through, and there'll be things that you've named lots of people that have been really influential in terms of your career, who you've worked with and who you've learned from. Is there anything that stands out for you as kind of, I know you've talked a lot about empowerment, you've talked about trust, you've talked about giving people that opportunity, even though from the outside perspective they might not be quite ready for it, but you've let them kind of show what they're made of, and let them get on with it. What would you say, if you wanted to be known for one thing in terms of your leadership style, what would it be?
Oh, I don't know, let me think. I don't know, Nina. That's a really difficult question.
Sorry, that's a hard one, isn't it? It is a hard one because there's so much to choose from.
Yeah, I think someone who's prepared to make decisions, and I think that's quite relevant today, because we need decisions. Yeah, and there's an awful lot of indecision out there at the moment, and and a lack of decision making. And I remember when I first went back to Aruba Trains Northern, and I made a decision on something. And one of the ops managers there, is kind of like, along in the tooth, been there a long time, but he just sort of said, thank God, someone's made a decision.
Yeah, and we do need that, absolutely.
And sometimes that's all you need, and at the moment we get a lot of, oh, maybe, or well, it's got to go here, it's got to go there, and we just need decisions.
Yeah, let's have a meeting about another meeting, but actually no, let's make a decision and get on with it.
Yeah.
And finally, and it's been a massive privilege to listen to this story, and I could actually just sit here for a few more hours yet. I've got loads of questions, but we have got a time limit, and I'm going to bring it to a close with one last final question. I always like to ask my guests whether they have a favourite quote, something which you kind of go to. It might perk you up, it might kind of ground you, it might inspire you. Is there something that you go back to time and time again, Dyan, in terms of a favourite quote?
So I've got quite a few, mainly from my gran, actually.
Right, brilliant.
She's usually the one, but no. The one I'm using at the moment, and I think it's quite relevant, is hope is the agent of change.
Right, I love that. Fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. And this podcast will, whilst we've recorded it just before Christmas, it will be the first Intuitive Insights podcast of 2021. And I think what an amazing quote to start with. Hope is the agent of change. Fantastic.
Yeah, I love that.
Albert, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time, for sharing your story, for being so open. And I already know that you were going to be inspiring lots of people who are listening into this. So thank you.
Thanks, Nina.
My huge thanks to Dyan for sharing her thoughts and her insights in terms of leadership, the railway industry, and the future opportunities that lie ahead. The next episode of Intuitive Insights will be with you in 2 weeks' time, when I'm joined by John Veach, Managing Director of Talgo UK. Whenever I speak to John and I ask him how he is, he always tells me he's living the dream. Some people say that with their tongue in the cheek, but John definitely means it. I'm really looking forward to welcoming him to the podcast.